is setting a policy. The convention sets the policy. So this is simply what the committee recommends to the convention. If the committee votes a resolution down, and a resolution that's voted down can still get clear support from 5 of the delegates, it can come to the floor with the support of those 5 delegates of the convention. And once the convention adopts a resolution, it becomes policy of the organization until the convention adopts future policy that would change it. If the convention votes a resolution down, it does not create policy. It simply says the convention didn't want to adopt that policy. You heard earlier in the board meeting that if you want to speak to resolutions on the floor, you need to write to resolutions@nfb.org. We will cover that in general sessions on Thursday and Friday to remind you of that. Committee, thank you for your continued thoughtful work to steer our organization and our policies going forward. I didn't ask the chair if there are any controversial resolutions or not.
Oh, never.
Never. She says nothing controversial. So you should be ready for dinner in an hour or something.
Yeah.
But thank you all for your work and best wishes to all of you. I look forward to being in person with you very soon.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to say that I'm being ably assisted here by the secretary of the committee, Mrs. Patricia Miller. So welcome. So we have 18 resolutions to consider. I know some of you wanted it to be 21, but 18 is a nice number. And we're going to get started. First of all, I want to say that Jennifer Bazar, you should be, you're going to be the first speaker on this resolution. Luann Blake is number 2, and number 3 is Mr. Vernon Humphrey and Justin Salisbury. So make sure that you're unmuted and watered up and ready to go, but short and sweet. Tell us why you are in favor of this resolution. All right. Resolution 2021-01 regarding the Medical Devices Non-Visual Accessibility Act. Whereas home use medical devices are becoming more prevalent and less accessible to blind Americans. And whereas most newer models of home use medical devices, such as glucose and blood pressure monitors, as well as emerging in-home devices that offer medical care options, such as chemotherapy, treatments, and dialysis, require that consumers interact with digital displays or other visual interfaces. And whereas the health, safety, and independence of blind Americans may be in imminent danger unless developers integrate non-visual accessibility in the design phase. And whereas accessibility is relatively easy and inexpensive to implement when it is incorporated into the design of a product from the outset. And whereas the ability to operate and use medical devices non-visually is essential to a blind person's well-being, independence, and overall quality of life. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the National Federation of the Blind Convention assembled this blank day of July 2021 that this organization urge the United States Congress swiftly to consider and pass the Medical Device Non-Visual Accessibility Act, thereby ensuring and protecting the independence, safety, and health of blind Americans. Before I turn it over to Jennifer, I just want to say that that's the last time you're going to hear in convention assembled this blank day of July. It's all there, but we're going to skip right to be it resolved that this organization. All right, Jennifer.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Bazer. I'm the affiliate president in South Carolina. I am a divorced mom of 2 young children, and this resolution resonates with me. I want to ensure for me and other blind federationists that we can access these medical devices to take care of our children 100% independently. In February, during our Washington seminar, many of our members spoke passionately and personally about their frustration with inaccessible devices. In-home devices, including the ones mentioned above, are the standard of care now, and they are going to in-home because of the rising cost of healthcare. Many of the pumps are inaccessible. They can't do their own insulin, flushing out the tubing, or even inserting the infusion set into their body. It is vital that we pass this in order to ensure the independence, health, and safety of all blind Americans. And it is easy and relatively inexpensive on the onset. Thank you.
Comments from the committee?
Move to pass.
All right, is there a second? Okay.
Second.
Now, committee, I'm going to call the roll, and bear with me. I'm going to do it from different places in the alphabet, different times. So I'm going to keep you on your toes. So, Pam Allen,
Pass.
Denise Avant,
Pass.
Everett Bacon,
Pass.
pass. Oh,
Yes, we're meeting.
Yeah,
say
yeah.
aye.
Yes,
Got
Adjourn,
it.
pass.
I'm thinking to myself, what?
Or approved.
Okay. Why don't
Sorry.
we- okay.
Yes.
You okay?
Yes.
All right. Everett Bacon,
Pass.
Edward Bell,
Yes.
Ron Brown, Amy Burrish,
Pass.
Sean Kylaway,
Pass.
Marcy Carpenter,
Yes.
Gabe Casares,
Yes.
Casares, Norma Crosby,
Yes.
Tim Elder,
I concur.
Chancey Fleet,
Yes.
Deepa Garaya,
Yes.
Everly Hairston,
Yes.
Lynn Heights,
Yes.
Scott Labar,
Yes.
Do one more.
Anil Lewis.
Do pass.
All right.
We're missing 2 people.
Anil, I'm sorry, Barbara Lose,
Yes.
Barbara Manuel,
Yes.
Jeannie Massey.
Yes.
That's all yes.
Okay, so since the majority have said yes thus far, I'm going to declare it's passed unless the committee wants to do something else.
Unequivocally. Wonderful.
All right.
Agreed.
So the resolution 01 is passed. Okay, folks, do me a favor, say yes, and when you vote. All right. So the next one who's going to be up is Luann Blake, followed by Mr. Humphrey and Justin Salisbury. And then, ladies and gentlemen, everybody knows that after 03 comes 10. So Albert, Aaliyah, you will be after them. Okay? Told you this was going to keep you awake.
Yeah.
All right. Pat?
Resolution 2021-02 regarding suppression of the rights of voters with disabilities. Whereas being able to cast a ballot privately and independently is the bedrock of our democracy. And whereas the passage of the Help America Vote Act, HAVA, has enabled the majority of blind voters and many others with disabilities to exercise their right to vote privately and independently at polling places. And whereas Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, requires that voters with disabilities be provided the opportunity to exercise their right to vote equal to the opportunity provided voters without disabilities. And whereas states that require voter identification or medical documentation or are limiting polling locations are restricting that right by creating barriers for individuals with disabilities. And whereas the time and expense in obtaining state-issued ID or other forms of identification can be onerous and therefore create a barrier for voters with disabilities. And whereas legislation requiring voter identification has been enacted or is currently before the legislature in Arizona, Alaska, Arkansas, Alabama, Connecticut, Florida, Georgia, Idaho, Illinois, Indiana, Kansas, Massachusetts, Maryland, Maine, Michigan, Minnesota, Missouri, Mississippi, Montana, Nebraska, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New York, Nevada, North Dakota, Ohio, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Texas, Virginia, Washington, and West Virginia. And whereas medical certification forms are frequently not available in an accessible format, requiring the signature of a medical or rehabilitation professional, and as a result are excessive and unnecessary hurdles for voters with disabilities to overcome, as well as a potential violation of privacy for disabled voters. And whereas Alabama, Louisiana, and Texas have enacted or have bills currently before their legislatures requiring medical documentation for voters with disabilities. And whereas limiting the number and or location of early voting and election day polling places may prevent some voters with disabilities from accessing a polling place due to a lack of transportation. And whereas legislation limiting the number or location of early voting or election day polling places has been enacted by or is currently before the legislatures in Arkansas, Arizona, Georgia, Illinois, Iowa, Kentucky, Michigan, Minnesota, Missouri, Montana, North Dakota, Nevada, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, and Washington. Now therefore be it resolved that this organization condemn and deplore all acts of suppression that make it difficult for blind and disabled voters to exercise their right to vote. And be it further resolved that this organization demand that state and local election officials protect the right of voters with disabilities to cast a private and independent ballot as required by HAVA and Title II of the ADA, without having to provide difficult to obtain state-issued identification and documentation. And be it further resolved that this organization demand that all state and local governments implement legislation and election procedures necessary to expand the number of polling locations so that they are accessible to public transit routes, and so voters need only travel a reasonable distance to cast their vote.
Luann?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. The ability to cast a vote without fear and in a manner that is private and independent is a cornerstone of our democracy. State laws that create barriers by requiring voter identification, certification of disability, and the need to travel long distances to a polling place to make it difficult, and in some cases prevent voters with disabilities from exercising their constitutional right to vote. Because these laws impact many more voters than just voters with disabilities, they are a threat to our democracy. In light of last week's Supreme Court decision upholding Arizona's voter suppression laws, it is vital that we, the National Federation of the Blind, make a stand that voter suppression is wrong, and we cannot hope to achieve the promise of our democracy without all citizens who are eligible to vote being able to exercise their constitutional right to vote freely and fairly. I urge the members of the Resolutions Committee to support this resolution. Thank you.
Comments from the
move.
committee? Did you make a motion?
Ryan
Yes.
Strunk, second.
Okay, thank you. All right, are we ready? If you folks want to say something, you got to make sure you get my attention. All right, we're ready to vote. Gary Wonder,
Aye. Yes.
Kevin Worley, Catherine Webster.
Yes.
Worley was yes.
Thank you. Ryan Strunk,
Yes.
Tracy Soferenko,
Yes.
Amy Rule,
Yes.
Casey Robertson. Try to keep your devices quiet, please. Thank you. Donald Porterfield,
Yes.
Barbara Pierce,
Yes.
Ronza Osman,
Yes.
Mark Mauer,
Yes.
Jeannie Massey,
Yes.
Barbara Manuel,
Yes.
Barbara Lose,
No.
Anil Lewis,
Yes.
Scott Labar,
Yes.
Did Casey Robertson vote no? That would be.
Lynn Heights,
No.
Everly Hairston.
Yes.
Two noes.
So we have 2 noes and the rest yes. Does anybody want to continue with the roll?
Waiting for the.
Yes, I think we should.
All right.
Everly.
Okay. Deepak Araya,
Yes.
Chancey Fleet,
Yes.
Tim Elder,
Yes.
Norma Crosby,
Yes.
Gabe Casares,
Yes.
Marcy Carpenter,
Yes.
Sean Calloway,
Yes.
Amy Burrish, Ron Brown.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay, we got Amy and then we
Yes.
got Ron.
We got
Edward
Ron.
Bell.
Ron, yes.
Oh,
Okay.
Okay.
Edward
Yes.
Bell,
Yes.
Everett Bacon,
Yes.
Denise Avant,
Yes.
and Pam Allen.
Yes.
All right, the resolution passes. So, Mr. Vernon and Justin is next, followed by Albert Elia, and then we'll go to Curtis Chong. Resolution 2021-03 regarding advancing employment of the blind in military service. Whereas blind people demonstrate our capabilities by performing many civilian jobs in the United States military, Department of Veterans Affairs, Department of Defense, and related agencies. And whereas participation in the defense of our nation through service in the armed forces is as important to qualified and capable blind individuals as it is to those who have sight. Yet, blind people who wish to serve in the United States military are currently disqualified based on blindness. And whereas blind people successfully working in non-combat positions, e.g. cybersecurity, personnel, finance, supply, can serve as positive role models for veterans and civilians who become blind. And whereas military service would teach blind people valuable skills that could be translated to the private sector after their military service and would provide the military with another pool of valuable talent. And whereas service members who become blind are frequently forced into medical retirement instead of using their valuable experience and talent for the service's mission. And whereas the United States Army has on occasion allowed service members, for example, Major Scott Smiley and Master Sergeant Vernon Humphrey, to remain on active duty for a period of time after a diagnosis of blindness. But all military services should regularly adopt this practice. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this organization urge the United States military to amend its policies to allow blind people to enlist in military service and to provide more opportunities for service members who become blind to remain on active duty by reclassifying their positions. Master Sergeant Humphrey.
Yes, ma'am. I was active duty and I was allowed to stay on for a period of time as legally blind, but when they upped my profile to a permanent 5 level, they said they were going to medically retire me. I was the manager of a medical equipment maintenance shop. I didn't work on equipment. I could manage doing the administrative tasks, but they saw it in their infinite wisdom to tell me goodbye. The point that this resolution is making is just as during World War II, we had many people that were not worldwide deployable, and they supported the United States government and military by doing tasks stateside. I understand that there will be a deployability problem, but the Women's Army Corps is the perfect example of people that the Army said can't go into combat, but they filled critical jobs for the United States and for us to complete our mission. So I think that the blind community, especially since I've become blind and I've met so many people in the blind community, could do many of these things, such as cybersecurity. Much of it is sitting behind a computer and watching, listening to traffic from other people, other countries. And I think that we have some very skilled blind people that could function well in those positions. Would they be able to worldwide deploy in a combat zone? No. But they could fill slots here and make the mission happen. I learned a lot by being a soldier. I grew up a lot by being a soldier. And I think it was one of the best things I've ever done. And I think that people in the blind community should have that option, especially people that are on active duty that become blind, because many of them have a history and resources and experiences that they can pass on to other people instead of putting them out to pasture early when there's still so much they could give.
Justin, do you have anything to add? Make it fast.
Yes, it's been wonderful working on this with our Veterans Division president. I am one of those people who wanted to be in the military when I was a kid, and then I was told I couldn't because I was blind. I don't want other blind kids to go through the same thing. Thank you.
All right, comments?
Bauer,
from the-
Madam Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I was not long ago, within the last couple of years, in Israel, and we had the opportunity to talk with a minister there who had to do with disability, and asked if, in as much as there's mandatory military service there, if blind people were a part of that, to which she responded that they are if they want to be. It's a voluntary matter. It's not a required part, but the policy there, at least, is to welcome blind people into the military service. I don't know what they do with them once they're there, but it is the policy of the country to invite blind people to be a part of the military machinery of that country. I think if it's good enough to call upon others to serve, it's good enough to give us the opportunity to do as well.
Thank
So
you.
moved.
Okay. Second? Okay. Pam Allen,
Yes.
Denise Avant,
Yes.
Everett Bacon,
Yes.
Edward Bell,
Yes.
Ronald Brown,
Yes.
Amy Burrish,
Yes.
Sean Calloway,
Yes.
Marcy Carpenter,
Yes.
Gabe Casares,
Yes.
Norma Crosby,
Yes.
Tim Elder,
Yes.
Chancey Fleet,
Yes.
Deepa Garaya,
Yes.
Everly Hairston,
Yes.
Lynn Heights,
Yes.
Scott Labar,
Yes, exclamation mark.
Anil Lewis.
Yes.
We have reached the majority. Anybody wish to continue? The resolution is passed.
Hoorah!
All right. So we're going to have Albert Aaliyah, then we're going to have Curtis Chong, and then after that we will have Desmond Jackson. So all of you be ready.
Resolution 2021-10 regarding the Department of Transportation's updated Air Carrier Access Act regulations for service animals. Whereas the United States Department of Transportation, DOT, released new Air Carrier Access Act, ACAA, regulations on the transportation of service animals, which went into effect on January 11, 2021. And whereas pursuant to the new regulations, airlines now require travelers with service animals to fill out a DOT form to travel. And whereas the new DOT regulations and guidance allow airlines to require that this form be completed in a PDF or HTML format, but some airlines are requiring both, creating a time-consuming process of entering substantially duplicative information in two different formats. And whereas even though large guide dogs are trained to fit into small spaces, the new regulations state that if airline personnel believe a service animal is too large to fit in a traveler's personal floor space, the traveler with the service animal must either purchase an additional seat for the service animal or allow the service animal to be transported in the cargo hold or wait for another flight with more room. And whereas DOT presented no evidence that actual service animals were the cause of any problems in air travel, and whereas other businesses, including entertainment venues and rental property management companies, have begun requiring similar forms for service animal users in contravention of the laws governing those businesses. And whereas guide dog users are being burdened with these new regulations because of emotional support animals and pets that are fraudulently claimed as service animals. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this organization condemn and deplore the Department of Transportation for permitting airlines to require guide dog users to complete and submit burdensome, onerous, and duplicative forms, despite presenting no evidence that guide dogs are a direct threat to anyone. And be it further resolved that this organization condemn and deplore the Department of Transportation for ruling that airlines may require blind guide dog users with large service animals to purchase an extra seat or risk being given the choice of having their guide dog placed in the cargo hold or their flight rescheduled. And be it further resolved that this organization demand that the Department of Justice find landlords, businesses, and other non-airline entities that require any pre-approval or completion of any forms for blind people to be accompanied by a guide dog to be in violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And be it further resolved that this organization urge the Secretary of Transportation to review and amend the DOT ACAA regulations to ensure that guide dog users do not continue to experience discrimination, including discrimination based on guide dog size. And be it further resolved that this organization urge the airlines as well as the Department of Transportation to work with the National Federation of the Blind to ensure that the amended ACAA regulations require no more than an oral attestation by a blind person that their guide dog is a service animal and that any misrepresentation of a pet as a service animal is a violation of federal law.
Al?
Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So these new regulations were bad when they were promulgated, and we had a discussion back in December about what to do, and the attempt to urge the airlines to simply not require it of blind people failed. Every single airline that functions domestically in the United States now requires this form, and sometimes requires both the DOT form and also, in addition to the form, Whereas the regs say it's an alternative that they can require the information in an HTML form. They require you to, in order to submit the PDF form, to also fill out HTML, taking like a half an hour per time a blind person wants to travel. That's number one. Number two, this is creating a great deal of confusion in the marketplace because businesses are seeing that these are there's this federal form now that you can require 48 hours in advance of traveling with a guide dog if you're in airlines, and I suppose legally unsophisticated. Operators of public accommodations and landlords are now taking that form and requiring the same information be provided in order to either rent a apartment, or in some cases to attend an event or visit a place of public accommodation with a service animal. Even though that's illegal, this is just it's a problem that has already begun only within 5 months of the new regulations being promulgated. And we need to put a stop to it. There's got to be one standard for what you have to do if you have a service animal, and it needs to be the one that's under the ADA, where you have to attest that it's a service animal. And finally, this notion that if you have a large dog, regardless of what you think and what your dog is capable of doing, if the staff of an airline simply thinks that your dog is too big to fit under the seat in front of you or in your foot space, and literally the words are encroaches on the foot space of another passenger, then they could either require you to travel on a later flight and totally upending your plans, or put the dog in the cargo hold, which is traumatic for the dog, traumatic for the service animal user, and potentially life-threatening for the dog. So I urge the committee to pass this resolution.
Comments from the committee?
Move adoption.
Second.
All right, we're ready to vote. Gary Wonder. Kevin Worley.
Yes.
Gary's.
Oh, okay, Gary, gotcha. Kevin Worley. Catherine Webster.
Enthusiastically, yes.
Ryan Strunk.
Yes.
Tracy Soforenko.
Yes.
Amy Rule.
Yes.
Casey Robertson.
Yes.
Donald Porterfield.
Yes.
Barbara Pierce.
Yes.
Ronza Othman.
Yes.
She said yes. Okay. Mark Maurer.
Yes.
Jeannie Massey. Barbara Manuel.
Yes.
Yes.
Barbara Lose.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Jeannie, did you say yes? Or did I hear things?
Yes.
Okay.
Did Barbara Manuel?
And Barbara Lose said yes. Barbara Manuel?
Yes.
Okay, now we're going to Anil Lewis.
Yes.
Scott Labar. Lynn Heights.
Yes.
Madam Chair, Worley was a yes.
I got you.
Oh, well.
Everly Hairston.
Yes.
Deepa Garaya.
Yes.
That's plenty.
Okay. Does the committee wish to continue? I think we've gone past the majority a bit. The resolution is
No, I think we're
passed.
good.
Thank you very much.
Okay, folks, if you're in the audience, please do not raise your hand because you're not going to be recognized. This at time is just for the committee members to speak. Thank you. All righty. Now we're moving up back to resolution 2021-04, and Curtis Chong is up next, followed by Desmond Jackson, and then we're going to have Raul Gallegos and Mike Hinkson.
Resolution 2021-04 regarding the use of overlays to make websites accessible to the blind. Whereas companies such as Equal Web, Max Access, Userway, True Abilities, Audio Eye, and Accessa-B are deploying overlays as a strategy to automate the task of making websites accessible, i.e. compliant with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG, and the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, And whereas to make websites non-visually accessible, overlays are intended, among other things, to identify unlabeled graphics and automatically attach readable text descriptions to them, to enable keyboard activation of links, buttons, expandable collapsible menus, and other controls which have been incorrectly coded to be triggered only with a mouse, and to insert header tags, often used by the blind for quick and efficient navigation on web pages where the print is highlighted or enlarged and not already marked as a heading. And whereas in achieving non-visual access, overlays today have their limitations. For example, they cannot determine when a picture that would be described generically as two people standing in front of a building should be described as Sarah and George standing in front of Macy's department store. They cannot automatically add audio description to a video presentation. They can inappropriately apply headings to text that is not intended to function as a heading. They can misinterpret the layout of a table and improperly handle row or column headings, and they cannot accurately solve an inaccessible visual CAPTCHA. And whereas the current inability of overlays to perform all of the tasks critical to non-visual access means that while they may help to make certain parts of a website non-visually accessible, they alone cannot guarantee full non-visual access to every website where they are deployed. And whereas companies deploying overlays have attracted hundreds of thousands of customers by fostering the false idea that with one easy operation, e.g. inserting a small amount of code, their websites will be accessible and fully compliant with prevailing web content accessibility guidelines, and further, that they will be protected from lawsuits. And whereas the companies deploying overlays have not in any meaningful way engaged with the accessibility community, not to mention the organized blind, to learn from a broad base of consumers whether or not overlays really improve the accessibility of websites. And whereas as the use of overlays has grown, blind people have encountered an increasing number of websites where they have been prompted to turn on an accessibility or screen reader mode by pressing Alt-1, Alt-0, or some other key combination, but there is no readily available information to tell them whose overlay is operating, how to report problems with the use of the overlay, whether or not the overlay is actually turned on, and how to disable the overlay if it isn't working as expected. And whereas some of the overlays which are supposed to improve the accessibility of the websites where they are installed present accessibility options, e.g. screen reader profile or anti-seizure profile, which are themselves not accessible to screen reader users. And whereas the lack of helpful information and the presence of inaccessible overlay controls leave people with disabilities without the means to provide feedback and suggestions, use the overlay effectively, or report problems related to the overlay. And whereas given the large customer base which some overlay providers enjoy, it is certain that the blind will encounter more and more websites where overlays are employed, ostensibly to improve accessibility. Consequently, there is a compelling need for us to obtain direct hands-on experience with the various overlays on the market today in order to determine the strengths and weaknesses of each overlay product and to identify those overlay providers whose technology might actually offer real and sustainable non-visual access to websites and web-based applications. And whereas the blind continue to fall behind as the number of websites created and deployed far outpaces the number of websites which we can confidently declare to be usable and accessible, and thus any solution which gives the blind true non-visual access is welcome. Now therefore be it resolved that this organization call upon overlay developers and their paying customers to engage with the National Federation of the Blind and the broader accessibility community to ensure that overlays are developed and implemented in ways that truly improve access to websites. And be it further resolved that this organization insist that current and potential overlay customers recognize that complete and long-lasting accessibility requires more than a one-time installation of code, that accessibility should be a priority throughout the entire life cycle of any product from design to full implementation. And be it further resolved that this organization condemn and deplore the unethical practice of overlay providers which attempt to convince website owners that overlays are the easiest and most affordable way to protect a website owner from lawsuits and make their websites accessible and compliant with the WCAG. And we demand that overlay providers stop making misleading, unproven, and unethical claims which falsely inflate the value and effectiveness of their technology. And be it further resolved that this organization demand that companies which develop and deploy overlays to improve accessibility design their overlays to enable users to know that an overlay is available, determine when an overlay is operating and when it is not, activate or deactivate an overlay as needed, configure the overlay to meet specific disability requirements, e.g. screen reader mode or contrast adjustment, using fully accessible controls, and obtain information to contact the overlay provider.
Curtis?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. I apologize that it seems this resolution is longer than any of the other ones we've had so far, but what I believe this resolution is trying to do, or what I intend for this resolution to do, is to help us to understand that the use of overlay technology is growing, that the companies that deploy the technology have engaged, some of them, not necessarily all of them, have engaged in such behavior as to create quite a lot of misapprehension amongst their customers, to the extent that at least one company that I know says they have over 125,000 paying customers around the world. That tells you that the people who are trying to think about accessibility mostly want to protect themselves against lawsuits, and they've been convinced that the overlay is a simple way to get them out of trouble. And it also, I think, sets forth the essential requirements that I think we as non-visual blind people getting onto the web need to have whenever we encounter an overlay, so that we can intelligently solve the problem, either get rid of it, take advantage of it, or whatever. But the idea is that we, the users, need to be able to have certain mechanisms to deal with an overlay when we encounter it, because we never know which website we use will have overlays deployed. And therefore, I believe that I hope that the committee will vote in favor of this resolution, so that we can set ourselves on a path to deal with something which we didn't start, but which I believe we now will have to deal with over time. Thank you.
Comments from the committee?
Move to pass.
Second.
Aiken,
Yes.
could we please start with Miss Fleet, because how she votes on this is how I'm going to vote on this.
Well, she hasn't asked for the floor. Oh, you mean in the voting?
Yes, ma'am.
Voting. Well, I'll think about it. Okay, anybody else have something? Any comments?
I agree with Everett.
I'm not asking that. Comments on the resolution. Thank you.
Gary,
Yes.
I support the resolution. I think it's complicated. I think it's difficult. I think we're not at a place where we are jumping up and down about artificial intelligence and overlays, but I think we dare not put ourselves in the position that we've been in so many times, about believing that we know what the answer is and we know what the answer isn't, and eventually we end up coming back to embrace it. I hope that we will not see this as a moral issue. I believe that too often we talk about enculturation as though it is a simple matter. We talk about accessibility as though it is inexpensive. And I think it is not a safe bet to hedge everything against the idea of artificial intelligence. I'd rather us engage and be a part of whatever this is to be than to set ourselves off and say, if you're going to do this, we don't even want to talk to you.
Lewis.
Other comments from the committee?
Fleet.
Elder.
Okay. I heard Fleet first, and then we'll get Elder. Go ahead.
Thank you.
And Lewis.
Compared to some resolutions, some work that we may have to do in the future, this resolution strikes me as mild as may. That being said, we don't quite know what the future holds. And this resolution does construct a framework to think about overlays and set some baseline standards for what is impermissible. It is impermissible to direct a blind person to an overlay with no escape, and it is impermissible to persist in deceptive marketing. Although I think that we may have to do lots more work in this arena in the future, I think that this resolution is useful as far as what it does, and I do support it. And that being said, I want to address our chair and say that I don't think it would be appropriate for me to vote ever out of order. I think that would set a precedent that we may not want to set. And I'm just happy to be where I am in the alphabet, wherever you find me.
Tim Elder?
Well, I'm happy to be adjacent to Fleet in the alphabet. But I support this resolution, and I think it's a good conversation to have because artificial intelligence absolutely has utility for accessibility and remediating web barriers. I think there is a context in which this is something we want. I don't know that this is the right business model. I have some concerns about some of the ways that it's being implemented. What particularly concerns me is that the ability for us to control what we want to do and how we want to access a website is being taken away from us. And that concerns me. So I think AI is good and we should support advances in innovation, but we should have the right to control how that artificial intelligence is guiding us and directing us. So the autonomy is what I am concerned about.
Anil?
Lewis? Yes. I think the resolution was well written because it does, as was stated earlier, set a framework. And I think it models what we as an organization need to do as we explore this new evolving innovative technology. We need to see the potential that exists or may exist and the utility of it while holding them accountable to what we know is necessary and required. The only thing I want to point out, with all due respect to my friend from Missouri, I don't think that it's either or. I think that we should always still focus on encouraging enculturation of accessibility because it goes beyond just a technical solution. When you're talking about enculturation, I realize that it's a difficult thing, but I think it should always be our goal to make sure that our partners and any other corporation not only focus on technical accessibility, but including the discussion of accessibility throughout the whole corporation.
Other comments from the committee?
Call a question.
All right. We're going to go through the whole roll this time. Gary Wonder?
I also agree with Anil.
Kevin Worley?
Yes, I am Kevin Worley, not Gary Wonder this time.
Okay. And you said yes for your vote. Is that true?
Yes, I did. Sorry.
Okay. Catherine Webster?
Yes.
Ryan Strunk?
Yes.
Tracy Soferenko?
Yes.
Amy Rule?
Yes.
Casey Robertson?
Yes.
Donald Porterfield?
Yes.
Barbara Pierce? Ronza Othman? Mark Maurer?
Yes.
Jeannie Massey? Barbara Manuel?
Yes.
Barbara Lose?
Yes.
Anil Lewis?
Yes.
Scott Labar? Lynn Heights?
Yes.
Everly Hairston?
Yes.
Deepa Garaya?
Yes.
Chancey Fleet?
Yes.
Tim Elder?
Yes, exclamation point.
Norma Crosby?
Yes.
Gabe Casares? Marcy Carpenter?
Yes.
Sean Calloway?
Yes.
Amy Burrish?
Yes.
Ron Brown?
Yes.
Eddie Bell?
Yes.
Everett Bacon?
Yes.
Denise Avant?
Yes.
Pam Allen?
Yes.
And Labar was a yes. I think I was muted.
All right.
No opposed.
No opposed. The resolution passes.
Thank you.
All right. Now, Desmond Jackson, you'll be next, and then we're going to have Raul and Mike Hinkson. And then after that, we're going to have Maura Loberg. Resolution 21, well, let me start over again. Resolution 2021-05 regarding mail problems that interfere with NLS services. Whereas the National Library Services, NLS, for the blind and print disabled, Library of Congress, and its cooperating network libraries provide books and magazines in specialized formats to blind and print disabled children, working age adults, and seniors losing vision. And whereas this valuable service not only provides the major source of reading material for these people, but also fosters literacy skills for children, interaction in community life for adults, and hope and encouragement for the newly blind. And whereas NLS and its network libraries depend on the United States Postal Service, USPS, to distribute its materials and the digital players, braille displays, and other equipment needed to listen to or read these books. Whereas these libraries are permitted to use the free reading matter provisions of the postal regulation, and the USPS claims on its website that free reading matter is, quote, treated as first-class mail for purposes of processing, delivery, and forwarding and return if undeliverable. And whereas from June 2020 to the present, far too many library customers across the nation have experienced long delay or total absence in receiving their books and equipment, even though the libraries have sent them to the individual patrons using the USPS. And whereas this failure by the USPS not only has a detrimental effect on the lives of blind and print disabled Americans, but is also creating a loss of taxpayer dollars since digital players, braille displays, and other valuable equipment are stuck in the post office, never reaching the people who need it. And whereas blind and print disabled citizens cannot use the USPS informed delivery service for residential customers to see if they will be receiving library materials or equipment because it is inaccessible. Whereas in Resolution 2018-19, the National Federation of the Blind urged USPS to make this service accessible and informed the agency that it was violating federal law, but the result was no action. And whereas, although Congress created and funded the Books for the Blind program under the Pratt-Smoot Act of 1931, neither the Library of Congress nor Congress itself demands any accountability from the USPS, which plays a vital role in the success or failure of the program. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this organization condemn and deplore the failure of the United States Postal Service to deliver materials and equipment to and from library patrons in a timely manner. And be it further resolved that this organization insists that the Librarian of Congress annually issue a report card to USPS based on data from NLS and its cooperating network libraries on the timely delivery of materials and equipment. And be it further resolved that this organization strongly urge the United States Congress to require the USPS to report to the Congress on steps that the USPS intends to take to improve timely delivery of library materials and equipment to ensure that these items are truly treated as first-class mail. And be it further resolved that this organization demand that the USPS immediately end its discriminatory practice by making its informed delivery service accessible to blind and print disabled citizens.
Move the adoption of the resolution.
Desmond?
Second.
All right.
Thank
we'll
you,
hear from
Madam Chair.
Desmond. Go ahead.
So as a kid growing up, I developed a deep love for the consumption of information. And as such, I could be confident that when I called up, as to order the latest novel or develop or to subscribe to a magazine, that in a couple of days, 3 days at tops, I could walk out on my porch and find some goodies. So as of late, as someone who is involved through many avenues with our community, not only through the NFB in Maryland, but also as a member of the board of Friends of the Library for the Blind and Print Disabled in Maryland, I've heard some appalling stories of everything from folks waiting up for weeks to get their reading material, to a person waiting 3 months to get a e-reader braille display or not even receiving it at all. So, they call this first-class mail, but I feel like as of late, we're treated as second-class citizens when it comes to access to information in this regard. So as such, I would urge the committee to adopt this resolution. Thank you.
Comments from the committee? We did have a motion, so we're ready to vote. Pam Allen?
Yes.
Denise Avant?
Yes.
Everett Bacon?
Yes.
Edward Bell?
Yes.
Ron Brown?
Yes.
Amy Burrish? Sean Calloway?
Yes.
Marcy Carpenter?
Barish is yes.
Yes. Exclamation mark.
Gabe Casares?
Yes.
Norma Crosby?
Yes.
Tim Elder?
Yes.
Chancey Fleet?
Yes.
Deepa Garaya?
Yes.
Everly Hairston?
Yes.
Lynn Heights? Scott Labar?
Yes.
Height says yes.
Thank you. Anil Lewis?
Yes.
Barbara Lose?
Yes.
That was 18.
Okay, we reached the majority. Anybody wish to continue? The resolution passes. All right. So we have Raul and Mike Hinkson up next, followed by Maura Loberg, and then after that we will have Ruth Sager.
Resolution 2021-06 regarding due process for potential applicants and consumers of guide dog school services. Whereas a guide dog is not only an important vehicle for independence and freedom, but also offers emotional support and companionship to its handler. And whereas the National Association of Guide Dog Users, NAGDU, has been contacted by guide dog users on a number of occasions concerning unwarranted and inappropriate repossession of their guide dogs by the guide dog training organization that provided the users with their guide dogs. And whereas training schools often remove the guide dog without even bothering to consult the user in advance to identify whether the school's information about problems is accurate, and even sometimes refuse to provide any justification at all. And whereas if guide dog handlers ask to appeal the training program's decision, they are frequently told that the supposed appeal was conducted internally, although there was never an opportunity for input from the handlers. And whereas, for example, in March 2021, Southeastern Guide Dogs, Inc. in Florida took a dog that the handler had possessed for 8 years without prior notice to the handler that there might be a problem, and also refused to allow the handler to participate in the appeals process, leaving the handler distraught over the loss of the dog and coping with reduced travel independence. And whereas guide dog schools further disregard consumer rights by refusing to provide accessible training materials, contracts, policies and procedures, and other information to consumers and potential applicants, even though knowledge about how to provide materials in specialized formats is readily available. And whereas many guide dog training schools have engaged in this unlawful and paternalistic disregard of the handler's rights for many years, now therefore be it resolved that this organization condemn and deplore the seizure of any guide dog by any guide dog training program without proper due process, and be it further resolved that this organization demand that all United States-based guide dog training programs immediately revise their processes for repossessing guide dogs to incorporate a third-party arbiter outside of the program's influence to investigate whether a guide dog should be removed or returned to the handler or dog owner. Be it further resolved that this organization insists that training schools' policies and procedures for removing guide dogs must include an unbiased appeals process that is decided by a third party who is approved both by the guide dog handler and the guide dog training program, and with the equal participation of all parties in this appeals process. And be it further resolved that this organization strongly urge guide dog training programs to work with the National Federation of the Blind and NAGDU to ensure that prospective students and consumers of their services are provided with timely, accessible information about all policies, procedures, and practices.
Raul?
Raul here.
Hi, this is Mike Kingston. Raul actually has a sore throat and asked if I would be the victim here and talk about this. So look,
and just
in
confirming that, I
2011,
just don't want to lose my voice.
Okay.
See, he is
We
still
got it.
there. He's spying on me anyway. In 2011, this organization passed the Guide Dog Consumer Bill of Rights that talked about a number of things that we as an organization believe and do believe that guide dog schools should do. Guide dog schools did not pay attention to that. Guide dog schools continue to do as they do, among other things, deciding on their own without any consumer input, without any real recourse for consumers about their own fates, what happens. For example, the dog that was taken from Reverend Susan Blake in March, without any discussion, without any advance notice. And there are other cases. There are things that are not even necessarily related just to removing a guide dog, but decisions are made and there is no recourse, no real consumer opportunity to appeal in an impartial way. So this resolution is really calling on us to begin to do more work to try to change that and to get schools to do what they should do to truly respect the rights of blind consumers throughout the United States.
Comments from the committee?
Lewis?
Go ahead.
Just out of curiosity, the resolution calls to have them adopt policies. Is there an exemplar out there? Is there a guide dog school that has the policies that our NAGDU organization would support implementation across other schools?
I must say that I haven't really seen one that has truly adopted policies like there is an appeals process, there is a true impartial process to deal with removal of guide dogs or appeal with acceptance of students and so on, and a number of the things that we could discuss and didn't bring up totally in this resolution, but no, there is not. And you'll see a resolution a little bit further down the road here that talks about the International Guide Dog Federation that has also chosen not to address the issues of consumer rights at all. So no, and that's part of the reason that we are urging for this resolution to be passed, because schools aren't doing what they should do. Good
Move to
question.
pass.
Further comments by the committee? Pam Allen,
Yes.
Denise Avant,
Yes.
Everett Bacon,
Yes.
Edward Bell,
Yes.
Ron Brown,
Yes.
Amy Burrish,
Yes.
Sean Calloway,
Yes.
Marcy Carpenter,
Yes.
Gabe Casares,
Yes.
Norma Crosby,
Yes.
Tim Elder,
Yes.
Chancey Fleet,
Yes.
Deepa Garaya,
Yes.
Everly Hairston, Lynn Heights,
Yes.
Scott Lamar,
Yes.
Anil Lewis,
Yes.
Barbara Lose,
Yes.
Barbara Manuel.
Yes.
I think we've reached the majority. The resolution passes. All righty. So Maura Loberg, you're next, and then we have Ruth Sager, and then after that we're having Marcus Soulsby. Resolution 2021-07 regarding Ability One approved nonprofits that deny employment to individuals who use text-to-speech software. Whereas more than 500 nonprofit agencies participate in the Ability One program to employ individuals with disabilities through federal product and service contracts. And whereas these nonprofit agencies purport to provide employment opportunities and training, including work from home opportunities to individuals with disabilities. And whereas some of these nonprofits use inaccessible pre-employment assessment games, restrictive statements on their websites, or targeted interview questions to screen out applicants who require text-to-speech access technology. And whereas some of these same nonprofits refuse to provide reasonable accommodations to employees who use text-to-speech software. And whereas Title I of the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, obligates covered entities to provide reasonable accommodations to employees and applicants with disabilities unless the accommodation would qualify as an undue hardship. And whereas Title I of the ADA prohibits covered employers from denying employment opportunities to applicants or employees with disabilities based on their need for reasonable accommodations. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this organization hereby condemn and deplore all Ability One approved nonprofits with discriminatory employment practices that deny reasonable accommodations and screen out applicants who use text-to-speech software. And be it further resolved that this organization demand that these nonprofits comply with the regulations implementing Title I of the ADA. And be it further resolved that this organization urge the Ability One Commission promptly to sanction or ban from participation in the Ability One program any nonprofit that demonstrates discriminatory hiring and employment practices against blind individuals who use text-to-speech software. Maura?
Good evening, committee.
this resolution is very close to my heart as a completely blind person who requires Braille and text to speech to get absolutely anything done. I believe this resolution is pretty cut and dry, but just to repeat that I absolutely am disgusted by organizations that use discriminatory methods to hire people with disabilities who are already marginalized and often overlooked because of our disabilities. I believe this resolution should pass, and that the Ability One program absolutely needs to comb through the organizations that have been trying to get around the ADA and Title I. Thank you.
Comments from the committee?
Move that it do pass.
Second.
Second.
All right, we're ready to vote. Gary Wonder.
Yes.
Kevin Worley.
Yes.
Catherine Webster.
Yes.
Ryan Strunk.
Yes.
Tracy Soferenko.
Yes.
Amy Rule. Casey Robertson.
Yes.
Donald Porterfield.
Yes.
Barbara Pierce. Ronza Offman.
Amy Rule was a yes.
Thank you. Mark Maurer. Jeannie Massey. Barbara Manuel.
Yes.
Barbara Lose.
I vote yes.
Thank you. Barbara Lose. Anil Lewis.
Yes.
Scott Labar.
Yes.
Lynn Heights.
Yes.
Everly Hairston. Deepa Garaya.
Yes.
The chair believes we have the majority. Anybody want to continue? All right, the resolution passes.
I did vote yes. This is
Who
Barbara.
said that? Barbara?
Yes.
Thank you. All righty. So next we're going to have Ruth Sager, followed by Marcus Soulsby, and then followed by Joe Orozco. So, Resolution 2021-08.
Regarding the unwillingness of ophthalmologists and other medical professionals to inform newly blind people of the benefits of rehabilitation services. Whereas the National Federation of the Blind knows that blindness is not the characteristic that defines you or your future, but many members of the general public do not believe or understand this principle. And whereas too many medical professionals, such as ophthalmologists, hold the same misconceptions about the capabilities of blind people as the rest of society. And whereas newly blind people frequently become frustrated because they cannot find information about how to adjust to blindness and have not been exposed to the positive philosophy of the National Federation of the Blind. And whereas since ophthalmologists are already treating newly blind people, they could provide such information but rarely do, because they view blindness as a failure of their practice. And whereas diabetes is the leading cause of blindness in adults, and diabetes requires medical care from endocrinologists and other medical professionals who could also improve the quality of life and independence of their patients by giving them information about rehabilitation services, but frequently fail to do so. And whereas the best way to change the attitudes of medical professionals towards blindness is to influence their training programs at a high level, such as reaching out to the Accreditation Council for Graduate Medical Education, ACGME, which evaluates medical residency and internship programs, and other similar organizations. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the National Federation of the Blind and convention assembled this day that this organization strongly urged the CEOs or governing bodies of medical professional organizations, such as the American Academy of Ophthalmology, the American Association of Clinical Endocrinology, and the Association of Diabetes Care and Education Specialists, to work with the National Federation of the Blind to develop a resource list of rehabilitation services for blind patients, and to encourage their membership to distribute this information so that newly blind people can learn that they can live the lives they want. And be it further resolved that this organization urge the ACGME to work with the National Federation of the Blind to ensure that medical professionals know that they have an obligation to inform their patients about adjustment to blindness resources and the benefits of the positive philosophy of the National Federation of the Blind.
Ruth?
Yes. Thank you, Madam President. I think the resolution is sort of self-explanatory, but in many areas, when the medical team feels that a patient needs further rehabilitative services, they do give information and guidance and assistance so that those patients receive that type of rehabilitative services. And we know as people lose vision, this is one of the areas in which many times the patients are given no information or very little information. And hopefully, if we can work with the accreditation agencies and those who ophthalmology students so that when they become professionals, they will know about the National Federation of the Blind and refer their patients who are legally blind to the National Federation of the Blind so that we can help people receive the rehabilitative services they are entitled to and that they need. Thank you.
Comments from the committee?
Lewis,
Go ahead.
we have a document out there called If Your Best Efforts Fail. I think it's still on the web, but it was primarily focused toward ophthalmologists. But this is a very good point, and maybe we'll take on in the Blindness Initiatives Department an effort to kind of look at that and expand it to what this resolution speaks to. I think that'll be a helpful tool in this process too. And with that, I move do pass.
Second.
All right. Pam Allen,
Yes.
Denise Avant,
Yes.
Everett Bacon,
Yes.
Eddie Bell,
Yes.
Ron Brown,
Yes.
Amy Burrish,
Yes.
Sean Calloway,
Yes.
Marcy Carpenter,
Yes.
Gabe Casares,
Yes.
Norma Crosby,
Yes.
Tim Elder,
Yes.
Chancey Fleet,
Yes.
Deepa Garaya,
Yes.
Everly Hairston,
Yes.
Lynn Heights,
Yes.
Scott Labar,
Yes.
Anil Lewis,
Yes.
Barbara Lose,
Yes.
Barbara Manuel,
Yes.
More than half say yes.
Okay, I think we've got it. Anybody wish to continue? The resolution passes. Thank you. All right. Now, Marcus, you're next, followed by Joe Orozco. And then after that, it's the Mike Hinkson Raoul duo.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
Massey is back.
Thank you.
Technology problems.
Okay, glad you're back. All right, Resolution 2021-09 regarding accessible electronic ballot return. Whereas the ability to cast a secret ballot independently is a cornerstone of our democracy that enables citizens to vote their conscience without fear. And whereas Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act requires that voters with disabilities be afforded an opportunity to exercise the right to vote that is equivalent to the opportunity afforded to voters without disabilities. And whereas Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act states that public entities that receive federal financial assistance may not discriminate against people with disabilities in their programs, services, or activities. And whereas the percentage of voters who voted by mail has steadily increased since 1996, And according to the MIT Election Data Science Lab report, about half of all voters voted by mail in the 2020 election. And whereas, while accessible electronic ballot delivery was available to voters with disabilities in approximately 25 states, only 5 of these states permitted the marked ballot to be returned electronically, and the remaining states required that the ballot be printed, signed, and returned by mail or placed in a drop box. And whereas many blind voters do not own or have easy access to printers, and as a result must rely on a friend, family member, or copy center to print their ballot, and need sighted assistance to sign the ballot, which jeopardizes the secrecy of their ballot, or sign the return envelope, which jeopardizes their independence. And whereas accessible electronic ballot return enables blind and low vision voters to return an absentee or by mail ballot privately and independently using their own access technology without needing to print or sign the ballot. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this organization demand that all United States jurisdictions provide accessible electronic ballot delivery and return for all federal, state, and local elections, starting with the 2022 election cycle, so that all blind and low vision voters who vote absentee or by mail can mark and return their ballots privately and independently as required by Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. Marcus?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and hello to all members of the committee from the family cabin at the very remote area of Pocahontas County, West Virginia, where I'm doing convention this week. And I'd like to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak to this resolution. Again, I'm Marcus Soulsby, president of the NFB of West Virginia. And West Virginia, my state, is one state where we have actually made great strides in this area with much success in the trials that we've had. Some of our members, including our immediate past president, Sherry Cook, and our first vice president, Ed McDonald, were involved in laying the groundwork with our Secretary of State in West Virginia for work with this, and platforms like Democracy Live, where we found it to be to the greatest of ease and privacy, as the resolution states, to vote independently, where truly no sighted intervention was needed whatsoever. And there is honestly basically no reason that any state should not be doing this, because after Help America Vote Act in 2002, and starting with this, as more states do launch this will actually be the beginning of true independent voting in America. We haven't had it. We've started to have it, but we haven't quite had it. And now this will resolve not only a lot of our issues with independence, but could also go a long way to resolve the lingering debate we have in the general populace over things like election security. All can be winners from a resolution like this. And if this became the law of the land, I believe that everyone, with the ease of technology and ease of voting, would come to see that. Thank you.
Comments from the committee?
LeVar?
Yes.
I would move do pass as one of the states that does have both electronic delivery and electronic return.
Okay. Any other comments?
Comments.
Is there a second? You made that motion, right, Scott? So is there a second?
I made the motion.
Second.
Second, Fleet.
Okay. All right. We're ready to vote. Chancey Fleet,
Yes.
Deepa Garaya,
Yes.
Everly Hairston,
Yes.
Lynn Heights, Scott Labar,
Electronically, I say yes.
Anil Lewis,
Yes.
Barbara Lose,
Yes.
Barbara Manuel,
Yes.
Jeannie Massey,
Yes.
Mark Maurer, Ronza Offman.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, Ronza said yes. Barbara Pierce,
Yes.
Donald Porterfield,
Yes.
Casey Robertson,
Yes.
Amy Rule,
Yes.
Tracy Stofarenko,
Yes.
Ryan Strunk,
Yes.
Close.
Catherine Webster,
Yes.
Kevin Worley,
Yes.
Gary Wonder,
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine.
Pam Allen. Why not?
Yes.
Okay, we got it. The resolution passes. All righty. Coming down the home stretch. So we're going to start now with Resolution 2021-11. And Joe Orozco is up, followed by Mike Kingston and Raul. And then after that is going to be Vernon Humphrey and Justin Salisbury. Resolution 2021-11 regarding accessible technology for federal employees and applicants. Whereas Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act requires that technology developed, procured, maintained, or used by the federal government must be accessible to people with disabilities, including federal employees and the general public. And whereas Section 508 requirements apply to all federal workplace technology, including time and attendance, issues, tracking, training, and all other software, virtual meeting spaces, and other technologies. And whereas Section 501 of the Rehabilitation Act prohibits federal agencies from discriminating against employees and applicants based on disability and requires agencies to comply with diversity and inclusion processes designed to improve the recruitment, hiring, advancement, and retention of federal employees and applicants with disabilities. And whereas many blind federal employees cannot perform the essential functions of their jobs, are prohibited from advancing in their careers, or are not hired because of agencies' use of inaccessible technology. And whereas the National Federation of the Blind has engaged in litigation with the United States Department of Agriculture, Department of Justice, Office of Management and Budget, General Services Administration, and other federal agencies or offices to remedy Section 508 and 501 violations. And whereas federal agencies continue to use technology that is inaccessible to employees with disabilities, regardless of federal law and legal precedents. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this organization call on the United States Congress to convene a Section 508 oversight hearing to examine and evaluate failures of federal agencies to comply with Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act. And be it further resolved that this organization urge all federal agencies promptly to investigate and resolve Section 508 and 501 violations and revise agency procedures to prohibit the purchase or use of any technologies that do not comply with Section 508 requirements. Joe?
You forget how rampant the lack of compliance is until you reach for a tool and remember that it's still not accessible. I think this resolution is important for blind employees who want to advance their careers, for applicants who want to serve their country in a variety of roles. And it's also important for the general public who needs to interact with the government. If you want to submit a complaint about an internet scam, for example, as far as I know, that process is still not accessible. Some agencies do it better than others, but as far as I know, no one's getting it right 100%. So this resolution is important, not just because it's the law, but because the federal government should be the one place where people with disabilities should feel included. It should be the one employer that gets it. I appreciate the opportunity to speak in support of the resolution.
I move
All
the
right.
adoption.
Is there a second? Okay, comments from the committee.
Hoffman. Thank you. All right. So I happen to chair the Blind Federal Employment Committee, and this is all we talk about all the time. The lack of accessibility, the lack of 508 compliance, how something might start out okay, and then 5 minutes later, it's not. People are being pushed out of their jobs that they were able to do. Agencies don't care. I know we've seen 508 resolutions before. I know that we've talked about it. We need this resolution desperately. This is an employment resolution. It will make sure that people keep their jobs. It will make sure that people are hired, because right now the 508 problems are a disincentive to employment in the federal government. I urge all of my colleagues to please enthusiastically support this resolution.
All right, we're ready to vote. Ronza Osman,
Absolutely yes.
Barbara Pierce,
Yes.
Donald Porterfield,
Yes.
Casey Robertson,
Yes.
Amy Rule,
Yes.
Tracy Soferenko, Ryan Strunk,
Yes.
Catherine Webster,
Yes.
Franco, yes. Sorry,
okay,
Catherine.
we got the both of you. Kevin Worley,
Yes.
Gary Wonder,
Yes.
Pam Allen,
Yes.
Denise Avant,
Yes.
Everett Bacon,
Yes.
Eddie Bell,
Yes.
Ron Brown,
Yes.
Amy Burrish,
Yes.
Sean Calloway,
Yes.
Marcy Carpenter,
Yes.
Gabe Casares,
Yes.
That's 18, at least. Maybe.
Norma Crosby.
Yes.
All right, we have a majority. The resolution passes. All righty, what are we doing? We are on Resolution 2021-12. So, Michael, you're ready, and Raul, I think, is probably still in the same
Here
position.
and we're ready.
Good, okay. And then we have Master Sergeant Humphrey and Salisbury, and after that, we're going to have Jamal Masrui.
Resolution 2021-12 regarding the inadequacies of the International Guide Dog Federation standards. Whereas in 1989, the International Federation of Guide Dog Schools for the Blind was created to accredit guide dog schools first in Europe and then throughout the world. And whereas this federation of schools was formed to focus on the activities of access, animal breeding, care and veterinary matters, funding opportunities, staff selection and training, and student selection and training, as described in the Federation's history located on its website. And whereas later, as the influence of this organization grew and the number of accredited school members increased, The name of the organization was changed to the International Guide Dog Federation, IGDF. And whereas the IGDF has not seen fit, by all publicly available indications, to involve any independent consumer representatives in its policymaking processes. And whereas the IGDF has not demonstrably promulgated any specific standards that enumerate or expressly protect the rights of guide dog training program consumers within the IGDF accreditation standards. And whereas, at least within the United States, historically numerous guide dog training programs have violated the civil and/or legal rights of their consumers, including the unwarranted, unsubstantiated, inappropriate, and unannounced seizure of guide dogs from their users without any visible resultant action on the part of the IGDF to address the concerns and complaints of consumers. And whereas many of the guide dog schools in the United States that have violated the rights of consumers are accredited by the IGDF, and whereas the National Association of Guide Dog Users, NAGDU, as early as March 2011, adopted the Guide Dog Users Bill of Rights, which in writing proposes a program that all guide dog training schools could adopt in order to provide their consumers with protection of their basic human, civil, and legal rights, as well as giving these programs a framework for ways to interact and work with students during their instruction at the training programs. And whereas guide dog training programs in this country, as well as the IGDF, continue systematically to ignore enactment of the methods, protections, and support of consumers as provided by the NAGDU Bill of Rights. And whereas thousands of accrediting bodies and professional organizations within the United States across a wide range of disciplines and fields, from the National Association of Social Workers to the Accreditation Board for Engineering and Technology and the Accreditation Council for Continuing Medical Education, recognize both the inherent need for and numerous benefits of transparency. And whereas to that end, accrediting bodies make their accreditation standards fully, readily, and publicly available to any and all interested parties, as opposed to the IGDF, whose standards include specific language saying that the standards are not to be shared or disseminated. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this organization call upon the IGDF to work with the National Federation of the Blind and NAGDU to create and promulgate standards and best practices that protect the rights of blind consumers of the services of guide dog training programs. And be it further resolved that we call on the IGDF to include on its board consumer representatives from the organized blind who will have full and equal participation, including voting rights, equivalent to those conferred upon all other board members. And be it further resolved that we call on the IGDF to make its current accreditation standards immediately available in full to a publicly available, accessible internet site, not only to the National Federation of the Blind and the National Association of Guide Dog Users, but to all members of the public, blind and sighted alike.
Mike?
If there's one organization in the world that knows something about standards and also that knows about how some people try to hide standards or ignore us, it is the National Federation of the Blind. There is no reason for the International Federation or Guide Dog Federation to hide its standards, but more important, there is no reason for them, and there should be every reason for them to want to work with us to improve standards. They didn't take any position or get involved in any way when Reverend Blake's dog was removed in March. They have not gotten involved in any way in the acknowledgement or support that could be gained by working with us and the Consumer Bill of Rights, Guide Dog Bill of Rights that we passed in 2011. The bottom line is that this organization, like guide dog schools, should not just be allowed to continue to go on its way and just be school oriented without consumer input and without involving us as equal participants. And that's what this resolution calls for.
Comments from the committee?
Worley.
Pierce, I heard, and then I'll get you, Kevin.
So this seems like this is motherhood and apple pie to me. but I have heard, but every so often we get sort of sandbagged with a resolution that suddenly has some opposition on the floor of the convention. And I would just wonder if the Mike or Raul would talk about whether or not the division is pretty much unanimously in support of this resolution. I don't want to do anything if we've got substantial objections in the division that this really has to do with, even though it seems to make sense to me.
There was some discussion during NAGNU meetings and with a couple of individuals about the wording of the resolution, and I have been told that the people who had concerns because we had a stronger resolution in the past, that we have been able to deal with that, and that was the big objection. It wasn't the concept as much as it was how strong or exactly the way we frame what we would like to seek and to see happen. And I believe that we have addressed that. So if there is opposition, certainly of any sort, of any significant amount, I'm not aware of it.
That's all I need to know. Thank you.
Kevin?
Worley, I can make you aware of it. I will vote no on this resolution. I am one of the folks who felt that the resolution was way over the top strong, and I don't think it has been changed enough. I think I haven't had any track record that I can find, and I've asked the authors, what have we done? If we're going to condemn and deplore, which, although we don't use those words, essentially this resolution is strong, what kind of outreach have we had to this outfit? Very little. And if we've had more than just an inkling, I haven't seen it, and they can't provide it. We've got a new guide dog president and board. They are doing some remarkable diplomatic kinds of things to open avenues to the guide dog crowd that we've not had before. And if we think, if we're going to fight somebody, let's make sure there's a fight to have. We can bring this resolution back next year if the work of the division leadership isn't working. I think this is unreasonably strong, and there's no reason for it. I wasn't completely sanguine with the other resolution, but I will vote no on this resolution.
Other comments from the committee?
Crosby with a question.
I can't hear who said, who asked for the floor.
Crosby with a question.
Oh, you're not on the committee.
I am on the committee.
Oh, Norma. I couldn't hear you, Norma. My apologies.
It wasn't Bing, it was Norma.
So I'm not a guide dog user, and so I don't have expertise particularly in this area. I do know there is some opposition. But my question is, does the IPDF currently accredit schools here in this country?
Yes. Most guide dog schools in this country are accredited by the International Guide Dog Federation. Schools started this organization, and schools make up the organization. And it is totally a school made up, not fictitious, but rather the makeup is schools.
So, and one more quick thing. In looking at their website, I see they're short, but I see some standards there.
But the overall set of standards are not. And again, there is not consumer involvement. There has not been. Mr. Worley talked about the lack of evidence for his satisfaction. That's fine. A lot of the reaching out was done by Marian Guizdala, who is no longer on the board and part of this organization. I don't know and haven't even tried to get the correspondence from him. I can only tell you, I know that there have been a number of attempts to reach out. But the bottom line is that we are where we are. And you know, we can talk about this all day, but the bottom line is there is no, if you do it the other way, there is absolutely not one single shred of evidence that demonstrates that the International Guide Dog Federation has made any attempt to work with consumers either. It has only been a school-oriented organization.
Louis, you're the last comment, then we're going to vote.
Just a question. I mean, I know his throat is sore, but Raul is the new president of NAGDU.
Right.
I'd like to see whether he affirms
Raul here. So during during this past year, I have tried on a couple of times to reach out to members of IGDF by way of a couple of meetings that we had through an organization called the Council of Guide Dog Users, which is not an organization. It's more of a get together where
it's the U.S. Council of Guide Dog Schools. But go ahead.
I'm sorry, Guide Dog Schools. Thank you. Where they discuss different things that guide dog schools are doing. They have speakers, etc. And there are members of IGDF there. I have informally, through those meetings, mentioned ours meaning NAGDU's desire to open dialogue. Now, I wasn't told no, I wasn't ignored per se, but it has not happened, to be fair. As for their standards, I do have to agree with Norma that on their website there are some, and there have since then been other searches that have turned out that some of their standards are published. Now, whether they are full standards or not, I don't have that information. What I can say is that one of NAGDU's new visions, new directions rather, is to try and work with all of the guide dog training programs in a way to open positive dialogue. Now, whether IGDF chooses to work with us or not remains to be seen. Like I said, we haven't had any formal communication.
It should be noted that this
not really,
resolution.
Just to finish this.
Go ahead.
I didn't get as much of a confirmation as I was hoping from your comments, but seeing that you are a proponent of the resolution, listening to what you're saying, I will recommend do pass.
Let me help
like this
Manila
is
a
the
little
best
bit.
strategy. Talking to Raul.
Let me help a little bit.
I'm talking to Raul. So if you, in leading the NAGDU organization, think this is the best strategy, I do want to support you in that effort. So I do move do pass.
Do we have a second for the resolution?
Second, Heights.
Okay.
And one comment, this was passed and affirmed by the board. This was brought to the board, and the board of NAGDU did affirm and pass the resolution.
All right. Raul, did you want to say anything else? Otherwise, we're going to vote.
I would like to say that I was not in favor of the language initially, but we did tone it down, and this is just to confirm that.
So the question is, are you in favor of the language now?
Sorry. No, I am not.
All right. So
And I rescind my motion.
we should not have had to go this direction to get there.
So I think it would be appropriate to withdraw the resolution then.
Which was my suggestion.
I rescind my second.
Okay. Then the resolution is withdrawn.
Thank you.
Resolution 2021-13 regarding the Department of Veterans Affairs to accept certification issued by the National Blindness Professional Certification Board. Whereas veterans who have served their country in the military deserve high-quality rehabilitation that empowers and inspires them to live the lives they want. And whereas in 2001, the National Blindness Professional Certification Board, NBPCB, was created and now offers certification in orientation and mobility, rehabilitation teaching, literary Braille, and unified English Braille, and emphasizes a positive philosophy of blindness and the importance of blind role models. And whereas the Department of Veterans Affairs does not accept certification issued by the NBPCB, and recognizes certification only by the Academy for Certification of Vision Rehabilitation and Education Professionals, ACVREP, when hiring rehabilitation personnel. And whereas certifications issued by the ACVREP, such as the Certified Orientation and Mobility Specialist, have traditionally been explicitly off limits to blind applicants, thus marginalizing blind people within the professional community affiliated with ACVREP. And whereas the NBPCB was established to administer certifications for blindness rehabilitation professionals in a way that does not discriminate against blind instructors and thus treats blind and sighted instructors equally. And whereas blind people holding certifications from the NBPCB have been successfully providing vocational rehabilitation services to blind adults through vocational rehabilitation programs funded by the United States Department of Education since 2001, demonstrating their capabilities for the past 20 years. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this organization strongly urge the Department of Veterans Affairs immediately to amend its human resource policies to accept certification issued by the National Blindness Professional Certification Board so that they are recognized as valid and treated equally to certifications from the Academy for Certification of Vision Rehabilitation and Education Professionals. Gentlemen, who's going first?
Justin will.
Okay.
It's a real honor to be working on this project again with the president of our Veterans Division. In Vermont, we're not just maple syrup farmers, ski instructors, and cheese makers. Some of us are also teachers of the blind, and this resolution will help make that happen. You see, when I came out of my master's program at Louisiana Tech, I thought I want to teach blind veterans in the VA. And I tried for a bunch of jobs in the VA, but I kept meeting every requirement for a lot of these jobs except the ACVREP certifications, because my certifications came from the board that the NFB created because we wanted blind people to have an opportunity to get certified. My certifications came from the non-discriminatory certification environment and a model that really truly believes in the full capacity of blind people. Now, those jobs in the VA are good jobs, good benefits, good pay. If blind people want to work there, we should have the opportunity. And basically what this is going for is that we can work there, but currently, if we do work there, it's not because of the certifications. You can sweep floors, you can shred papers, but you can't do the things that require the certification. And so we're not being aggressive or hostile here, but we're simply asking them, we're urging them to accept our certifications because we know, in summary, that blind people can do these jobs. We know that our certifications are not only valid, but they're excellent. And we know that we need a policy change in the human resources policy in order to make it so that nationwide, the VA programs will accept our certifications for these jobs. So please join me in supporting this resolution.
Vernon, did you want to add anything?
As a veteran that has gone through the Veterans Administration Blind Rehab Program, it's an excellent program. But I also know that I have been able to learn more. Well, not more, but I've been able to learn differently from people that are experiencing the same thing I am. And I think it will be beneficial to have more visually impaired people with a broader background bringing this training to our veterans.
Comments from the committee? Do we have a motion?
Motion
So
to do
moved.
pass?
Second.
All right, we're ready to vote. Pam Allen,
Yes.
Denise Avant,
Yes.
Everett Bacon,
Yes.
Eddie Bell,
Absolutely, yes.
Ron Brown,
Absolutely, yes.
Amy Burrish,
Yes, ma'am.
Sean Calloway,
Yes.
Marcy Carpenter,
Yes.
Gabe Casares,
Yes.
Norma Crosby,
Absolutely.
Tim Elder,
Yes.
Chancey Fleet,
Yes.
Deepa Garaya,
Yes.
Everly Hairston,
Yes.
Lynn Heights,
Yes, exclamation point.
Scott Labar,
Yes.
Anil Lewis,
Yes.
17.
Barbara Lose.
Yes.
Okay, we've got a majority. The resolution passes. All right. Next, we're going to have Jamal Masrui, followed by Debbie Brown, and followed by Master Sergeant Pumphrey again. Okay.
Resolution 2021-14 regarding the digital accessibility of conferences. Whereas in almost every professional field, conferences regularly occur in which presenters analyze or teach topics related to a subject of shared interest. And whereas conferences are in fact so common as to be organized in furtherance of nearly any field of human endeavor, addressing academic, civic, recreational, or personal subjects. And whereas over the many years that conferences have been organized around the world, solutions have been developed to implement principles of universal design, inclusive participation, and accessible use. And whereas international standards for the accessibility of information and communication technology, ICT, have been established by broad consensus following decades of experience with accessibility problems across government, corporate, and consumer sectors of society. And whereas central to these standards are the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG, developed by the World Wide Web Consortium, and whereas WCAG has been extended to be technology neutral, covering domains such as video presentations, online chats, and mobile apps, in addition to websites. And whereas, despite existing standards and solutions, blind people continue to encounter unnecessary barriers to full participation in conferences, including events within the field of accessibility. And whereas problems frequently arise from a common practice in conferences where speakers show slides during their presentations, whether live or recorded. And whereas slides enrich a presentation in multiple ways, such as giving an outline summary of the content that helps learners understand its hierarchy and highlights, and whereas slides also share precise written information, including names, URLs, and email addresses, that would be tedious, time-consuming, or error-prone for presenters to speak and spell, and whereas multiple techniques exist for making this content accessible to blind conference participants. And whereas one technique requires presenters to submit an advanced electronic copy of their slides conformant with accessibility guidelines. And whereas such slide decks in formats like PPTX, PDF, or HTML are then made available for conference attendees to read in ways that work best for them, either with or without access technology. And whereas it is equally important that presenters who are blind, not only attendees, are afforded a fully accessible process from submitting a proposal to delivering a presentation, thereby enabling audiences to benefit from their expertise. And whereas conferences about accessibility itself should serve as role models, but often they are not. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this organization strongly urge that conferences in all fields make their digital content and procedures non-visually accessible based on international standards applicable to experiences of both attendees and presenters. And be it further resolved that this organization call upon conferences in the field of accessibility in particular to model and promote best practices in digital accessibility, including, among others, the following annual events: CSUN Assistive Technology Conference, Accessing Higher Ground, Access U, and M Enabling Summit.
Jamal?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is Jamal from Seattle. As a blind professional in the field of accessibility, I want to benefit, like others, from conferences in my field. You might think that conferences on the subject of accessibility in particular would practice what is preached, but often that is not so. A few months ago, for example, I attended the CSUN Assistive Technology Conference, which was all virtual this year. Attendees could play videos in which presenters spoke and showed slides. Since captions were available, it was evident that accessibility had been considered. No slide decks were available, however, for inspection with a screen reader. Slide presentations are not just eye candy for sighted attendees. They typically include key pieces of information such as web and email addresses for follow-up. It was telling that some speakers encouraged attendees to take screenshots of the slides rather than relying on notes taken from what was being shown. An international standard called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, I beg your pardon, addresses the digital accessibility of content, and multiple techniques have been developed to address text alternatives to visual media. There's no excuse for virtual conferences to treat accessibility as an embellishment or an afterthought. Although this resolution was motivated by my personal experience with a particular conference, it is meant as a general call for the accessibility of conferences regardless of field. The pandemic has made more conference activities brought into the virtual domain, either partially or completely. I think we should convey the clear expectation that digital accessibility must be incorporated throughout. Thank you for your consideration.
Comments from the committee?
Elder.
Okay, Bacon first, and then we'll get Elder.
So I just want to say that I'm in favor of this resolution. I think it's excellent that we're going after some of the assistive technology conferences. They should know better. I also think we need to address some of the other kinds of conferences out there that are much larger. A company out of Dallas, Texas called Freeman Corporation. They run CES in Las Vegas, and we should definitely address some of these large entities as well and make sure that they're doing the same thing. And that's just what I wanted to say.
Tim?
I would just briefly say I really commend Jamal for bringing this issue. This is one that could have easily slipped under the radar, and it's an important one, and it's what we really need to get full and equal access to these professional conferences. So I fully support what is in this resolution.
Amen.
Mauer. Yes. Mauer?
Was established, one of its first decisions was to know whether it should make its website accessible, and it determined that it would wait until there was a more appropriate time.
Dr. Mauer, we missed the beginning. Who did that?
The International Association of Accessibility Professionals.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
They decided that they did not need an accessible website, at least at the beginning. I have no idea whether it's accessible now.
Okay, we had a motion, I think.
Yes. Hairston motion.
Okay, second?
Elder, second.
Okay. All right. Pam Allen?
Yes.
Denise Avant?
Yes.
Everett Bacon,
Yes.
Eddie Bell,
Yes.
Ron Brown,
Yes.
Amy Burrish,
Yes.
Sean Calloway,
Yes.
Marcy Carpenter,
Yes.
Gabe Casares,
Yes.
Norma Crosby,
Ma'am.
Tim Elder,
Yes.
Chancey Fleet,
Yes.
Deepa Garaya,
Yes.
Everly Hairston,
Yes.
Lynn Heights,
Yes.
Scott Labar,
Yes.
Anil Lewis,
Yes.
Barbara Lose.
Yes.
All right, the resolution passes. Thank you. Now we're moving on to Debbie Brown is next, followed by Master Sergeant Humphrey, followed by Anil Lewis and his cohorts. And then the last resolution will be Aaron Espinoza. Resolution 2021-15 regarding better protection for pedestrians when crossing bike lanes to reach floating bus stops and shared cycle track stops. Whereas floating bus stops, protected bike lanes, and shared cycle track stops are becoming common in many urban and suburban areas. And whereas a floating bus stop is a stop on an island in the middle of the street that allows the bus to stay in its travel lane rather than pulling up to the curb, while allowing cyclists to continue their use of a bike lane situated along the curb. And whereas a shared cycle track stop is a stop where a protected bike lane rises and runs along the boarding area, along the extended curb, rather than wrapping behind the boarding area. And cyclists can ride through the boarding area when no transit vehicles are present, but should yield the space to boarding passengers when a bus stops. And whereas pedestrians are in danger because they must cross these bike lanes to get to a floating bus stop or shared cycle track stop, which could involve crossing in the middle of the block where there are no traffic lights and in many cases no crosswalk markings. And whereas traffic control devices would offer some protection to pedestrians by reducing the speed of bicycles, electronic and low-speed scooters, and other micromobility devices. And whereas blind pedestrians face an additional danger because bicycles, electric and low-speed scooters, and similar micromobility devices are usually silent and therefore cannot be heard by blind pedestrians. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this organization urge county governments and local municipalities to make greater efforts to consider the needs of and gather input from pedestrians, including the blind, when designing bicycle lanes, floating bus stops, and shared cycle track stops, to ensure that traffic controlling devices are effective. And be it further resolved that this organization urge cities and municipalities across the United States to mark crosswalks and provide other signage between curbs and floating bus or shared cycle track stops to warn bicyclists and users of electronic low-speed scooters and other micromobility devices about pedestrian crossing zones. And be it further resolved that this organization urge cities and municipalities across the United States to pass laws or ordinances mandating that pedestrians in these crosswalks always have the right of way. Debbie?
Thank you, Sharon. Everybody can hear me, I hope. Yes, So this is, I live in Montgomery County, Maryland, and we are discussing this and looking at some actual intersections. And this is coming up more and more. We know that these micro mobility devices and bike lanes are not going away. More people want to build this way in hopes that more people will stop using cars. So that we need to use these streets where these bike lanes are to get on the bus. And so that of course, we can't hear the bikes. We don't want to get hit by them. So we want to make sure that they stop when they're supposed to. And there are many ways of doing this besides traffic lights and that we usually think of as control devices. There are ways of slowing them, putting ramps and putting surfaces that make the bike want to slow down because they feel a little rough. So there are many ways of doing this. But as blind people, we want to have some say in what is going on. And we want to make sure that the issue is before our local governments.
Comments from the committee?
Cáceres.
I can't hear you.
Cáceres.
Go ahead, Gabe.
So I'm really glad to see this resolution. I was chuckling while you were reading it because now we're treading a little into my territory with municipal governments. But I hope my colleagues support this resolution. I intend, if passed, to take this resolution and use it with my own administration. But I did want to take this opportunity to encourage everyone who is seeing this development in their communities to get involved. I can't tell you how many community meetings I'm a part of where I'm the only person with a disability there. So I hope that if this resolution passes, that our local chapters and our state affiliates will use this as a tool to build relationships with municipal and county government.
Bacon.
Go ahead.
I make a motion that it pass. I'll
second.
All right. I think that we're ready to vote. Gary Wonder.
Yes.
Kevin Worley.
Yes.
Catherine Webster.
Yes.
Ryan Strunk.
Yes.
Tracy Sofranco.
Yes.
Amy Rule.
Yes.
Casey Robertson.
Yes.
Donald Porterfield.
Yes.
Barbara Pierce.
Yes.
Ronza Othman.
Yes.
Mark Maurer.
Yes.
Jeannie Massey.
Yes.
Barbara Manuel.
Yes.
Barbara Lose.
Yes.
Anil Lewis.
Yes.
Scott Labar.
Yes, ma'am.
Lynn Heights.
Yes.
Everly Hairston.
Yes.
Deepa Garaya.
Yes.
Okay, we have the resolution passes. All righty. So now we have Master Sergeant Humphrey next, Anil Lewis, and then Aaron. Now, Master Sergeant Humphrey, this resolution was late, and who were the three people that you, committee people that said that this could be considered?
I contacted Gary, and he said he would. I contacted Anil, and he said he would. I sent an email to Scott and haven't heard back from him.
He will.
Scott, do you agree that we consider this resolution?
Yes.
Okay, and Anil, you agree?
Yes.
And Gary?
Yes, I agree.
Okay, great. All right, let's go.
Resolution 2021-16 regarding the accessibility of kiosks in U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs medical facilities. Whereas kiosks are increasingly used in Veterans Affairs VA medical facilities and community-based outpatient facilities nationwide as a means to improve veterans' access to their health information. And whereas VA kiosks are used to conduct patient intake, update personal and insurance information, and complete other administrative tasks, with additional functions slated to be added. And whereas these kiosks lack the necessary audio navigation prompts and are almost universally inaccessible to blind veterans. And whereas blind veterans deserve the same privacy, respect, and independence afforded to sighted veterans, but blind veterans are often forced to rely on assistance from sighted patients or others, and as a result, risk sharing private health information simply to check in for appointments. And whereas this can be a humiliating and degrading experience that compromises the privacy each veteran should be able to expect. And whereas the VA facilities using these kiosks are covered by sections 504 and 508 of the Rehabilitation Act and are prohibited from discriminating against individuals with disabilities and using inaccessible technology. And whereas existing technology allows accessibility features, including audio output, to be built into the operating systems used in kiosks. And whereas the hardware of these kiosks is often already configured for audio output in keyboard or touchscreen input, and therefore there are no technological reasons why these kiosks cannot be made accessible to the blind, offering full equality of access. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this organization condemn and deplore the United States Department of Veterans Affairs' use of inaccessible kiosks in VA medical facilities in violation of federal law and in disregard of the needs of many of the veterans who sacrificed so much for their country. And be it further resolved that this organization demand that the Department of Veterans Affairs stop using inaccessible kiosks immediately. And be it further resolved that this organization demand that the Department of Veterans Affairs purchase and use only kiosks that offer full and equal access for the blind.
Master Sergeant Humphrey.
First, Madam Chairwoman, I haven't been called Master Sergeant in many years, and it feels good, so I appreciate it. Thank you very much. The kiosks, if you were here earlier and you saw Scott's little is going to fix it. The Veterans Administration, the government, the federal government should be setting the example on accessibility everywhere. And if they don't follow their own rules, what chance is it that other organizations aren't going to follow the rules either? And these kiosks, when you walk in, you have to take your ID card and you have to scan it. Well, thankfully, last time I went to the VA, I have tunnel vision. I have 20/20 acuity. I can see some stuff, but I couldn't use the kiosk without my wife, because which way the card go in and how does it go and where does it go and it's confusing. And unfortunately, the United States Army medical facilities use similar touchscreens. They don't use kiosks, they use touchscreens. So we, as in the National Association of Blind Veterans, feel very strongly that the Veterans Administration needs to be called out and say, look, you have blind veterans. They have given you their all. They've done everything you have asked them to do. Many losing their sight because of their duty. And it was always mission first. We've done our job. Now we expect the same treatment that everybody else gives. Thank you.
You're here.
Louis,
Comments from the committee?
Louis,
Yes.
just like to offer, I take this in some way personal, as a shortcoming. I know that years ago when we were working on accessibility, medical devices, et cetera, that the actual kiosk in the Veterans Administration was one of the items on the agenda. So I do know that individuals, I think Dwight, the previous president of our Veterans Administration, was working with another gentleman whose name escaped me at this time. So they were actually working with the administration. We're not really receiving any assistance or support in moving in that direction. I know that just based on the work we've been doing under our SENA, that there's significant progress in making kiosks even more accessible. So I regret that we were not able to act then, but I do respect the fact that we are ready to act now. I move to do pass.
Second.
Okay. Dwight was ill. He did want to speak on this resolution, but then his health didn't permit it. So we're ready to vote. All right. Let's start with Everly Hairston.
Yes.
Lynn Heights.
Yes.
Scott Labar.
Yes, ma'am.
Anil Lewis.
Yes.
Barbara Lose.
Yes.
Barbara Manuel.
Yes.
Jeannie Massey.
Yes.
Mark Maurer.
Yes.
Ronza Alsman. Barbara Pierce.
Yes.
Donald Porterfield.
Yes.
Casey Robertson.
Yes.
Amy Rule.
Yes.
Tracy Soforenko.
Yes.
Ryan Strunk.
Yes.
Catherine Webster.
Yes.
Kevin Morley.
Yes.
Gary Wonder.
Yes.
The resolution passes. All right, now we're moving on to
Thank you very much.
Anil. Who are your three people, since your resolution was late as well? Who are your three
Yes.
committee members?
Elder, Labar, Hoffman, and Worley were the individuals
Okay,
that.
thank you. All right, and JJ and Ty are ready to speak.
I know Ty had another federation obligation.
Right. Well, we'll see if
But
she's
JJ,
here.
I believe, may have joined. So if he's able to speak, I would definitely yield the floor to him too.
Okay. So here we are on Resolution 2021-17. Whereas the National Federation of the Blind, the transformative membership and advocacy organization of blind Americans with affiliates, chapters, and divisions in the 50 states, Washington, D.C., and Puerto Rico, is the leader in advocating for non-visual accessibility. And whereas, through the active participation of our network of members across the country, we engage in the development, testing, and implementation of a host of non-visual access solutions, offering the lived experience and expertise of the blind. And whereas, as America's civil rights organization of blind people, the National Federation of the Blind carries out the will of the blind of Americans as expressed through our national convention and between conventions through the decisions of our elected officers and directors. And whereas our movement values empowering individual members to influence organizations positively regarding concerns using the Federation's philosophy and policy platform, and to coordinate with our national leadership. And whereas National Federation of the Blind members engaged with Accessibility, a company that develops a website overlay product, and after researching and interacting with the company, representatives determined that the marketing and business practices of Accessibility were disrespectful, misleading, and fallacious. And whereas our members brought the actions to the attention of our national president and board of directors, who reviewed available information related to Accessibility's business practices and came to agree that they currently engage in behavior that is harmful to the advancement of blind people in society. And whereas, in particular, it is the opinion of the board of directors that Accessibility peremptorily and scornfully dismisses the concerns blind people have about its products and its approach to accessibility, treats blind access technology experts shabbily and disrespectfully in private meetings, and disparages the blind in the press and their other communications. fails to acknowledge that blind experts and regular screen readers, users, know what is accessible and what is not. Overstates the effectiveness of automated testing by diminishing the importance of having actual humans participate in the user testing process. Promotes the false claims of attaining web content accessibility guideline compliance through the integration of one line of code. And whereas, as a result of this review, the board revoked Accessibi's sponsorship of our national convention on June 22nd, 2021, stating, quote, "We hope that the company will ultimately recognize and appreciate the experience and expertise that blind people can bring to improving its products and services and align its mission with the expressed will and true interests of the blind. Unless and until that happens, we decline to accept Accessibi's participation in the 2021 National Convention or to allow it to use our convention platform to promote itself," end quote. Now therefore be it resolved that this organization support and affirm the actions taken by our National Board of Directors to protect the interests of blind Americans by holding Accessibi accountable to the will of the nation's blind. And be it further resolved that this organization condemn and deplore Accessibi's disrespectful and misleading marketing and business practices. Anil? JJ, somebody going to speak on this resolution?
Okay.
This is
Can you hear me?
Ty. Neil, are you
Hold
here?
on a minute. We'll start with Anil
Okay.
now that he's here, but we'll get
No,
to
I'm here. I was waiting to see if JJ was connecting. I thought Ty was not going to be available. So
Yeah,
both
technically I'm not, but go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, well then I'll take the lead. Really, to me, this resolution is multifaceted. But for me, the power of the resolution is really in the whereas, where we're pointing out that we value the members to take a role in helping us move forward with the actions that we need to take as an organization. You'll hear in my presentation later that people do tend to perceive that we, meaning the National Federation of Blind Adjourning and Institute staff, et cetera, is bigger than we are. And if it's not for our members, then we're not able to really cover the scope of advocacy that we need to. So indeed, it was written in a way that outlines the proper structure and strategy that needs to be implemented by our membership so that they can support us throughout the whole organization to meet the needs that our members have for full participation. But even more so, I think that it speaks to, one, affirming the board in its capacity to make sure that we're doing what we need to do in between conventions, which is the supreme authority. But even more so, the real piece of it is demonstrating how individuals who are indeed experts through their lived experience and training in accessibility, some were not even interested in engaging, but were asked to engage. But when they started disagreeing with what Accessibility was putting out there, the strategy, et cetera, it just got twisted. I'm fine with disagreement, and we have to deal with that every day. That's how we get to the truth. We listen to different perspectives and different opinions, but you can't do it in a way that's disrespectful. That's just inappropriate. And I cannot stand by and let our members who are really truly trying to make sure that we're gaining the accessibility that we need to be disrespected in that fashion, because that's going to discourage them from actively participating. And with that, that limits my ability and my capacity as the executive director of Blindness Initiatives to do what the Federation demands of me. So I stand strong and ready to support this resolution in a real way, to affirm the board decision, but also to support and reaffirm the value that we have for our member participation in the work that we do as well. That's the only way we, as the National Federation of the Blind, can really get the work we need done.
Okay, who's next? Ty or JJ?
I don't have anything to add. I think Anil covered this unless you need more clarification. You have
That's
specific
fine.
questions. Thanks.
JJ?
I don't believe he's available at the moment.
This is
He's
Ryan.
here.
I
He's-
move adoption.
Second. Second.
JJ was trying to get unmuted, I think. Oh, he is unmuted. JJ?
Okay.
He just texted me. He said, go ahead. So he must still
He's
be
trying.
having connection problems. He says, go ahead. He's having connection problems.
All right. All right. Who made the motion?
Ryan Strunk.
Okay, and there was a second?
Webster.
Thank you. All right. Let's start with Marcy Carpenter,
Yes.
Gabe Casares,
Yes.
Norma Crosby, Tim Elder,
Yes.
Chancey Fleet,
Yes.
Deepa Garaya,
Yes.
Everly Hairston,
Yes.
Lynn Heights,
Yes.
Scott Labar,
Yes.
Anil Lewis,
Yes.
Barbara Lotes,
Yes.
Barbara Manuel,
Yes.
Jeannie Massey,
Yes.
Mark Maurer,
Yes.
Ronza Osman, Barbara Pierce,
Yes.
Donald Porterfield,
Yes.
Casey Robertson,
Yes.
Amy Rule,
Yes.
Tracy Soferenko,
Yes.
Ryan Strunk.
Yes.
Okay, the resolution passes.
Lewis,
Yes.
I just wanted to offer really thanks to all of the members that really reached out to President Riccobono when all of this was going on. A lot of people assume that we know more than we know. But if you don't bring those directly to the leadership in a way that we can really understand what the problem is, then we can't act on it. So I really want to express my appreciation to all of the members that did exactly that. So thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, we're on our last resolution. Before we begin, I want to take this opportunity to thank all the authors and the spokespeople and thank Pat Miller. I think we've had a very good meeting. I wanted to say that now because I know you're all going to run out the door when we complete this meeting. So let's go with Resolution 2021-18.
Regarding National Federation of the Blind voting procedures during in-person and virtual conventions. Whereas the privilege to vote for National Federation of the Blind future officers, policies, and constitutional amendments is only granted to good standing members belonging to a state affiliate present at the National Federation of the Blind National Convention as defined in the National Federation of the Blind Constitution, Article 3, Membership, Section E. And whereas scheduling conflicts, transportation options, and economic difficulties result in good standing members not being able to exercise their voting privileges solely based mainly on factors out of their control. And whereas the National Federation of the Blind has implemented various types of accessible and inclusive remote voting options during the 2020 and 2021 virtual national conventions, setting a precedent going forward for remote voting, but has not made an absolute decision on the matter of remote voting. And whereas the implementation of remote voting in various United States elections have shown no proof of voter fraud, manipulation, and uncorrected error, but have shown proof of increased voter participation, voter access, while ensuring the most democratic process possible. Now therefore be it resolved that this organization authorizes the President of the National Federation of the Blind and the National Board of Directors to implement a method to permit voting by members in good standing in all future in-person/virtual national convention business meeting elections, resolution meetings, and constitutional amendments. And be it further resolved that this organization will hold monthly open calls to gather feedback from the public for the implementation of remote voting. And be it further resolved that this organization will explicitly create a section for policies and standards for remote voting in the organization's constitution. And be it further resolved that this organization will conduct a yearly public review on the state of remote voting, including the security, accessibility, usability, inclusivity, and any other issues that good standing members have with remote voting.
Aaron?
Yeah, I would like to withdraw it. I would like to withdraw this resolution.
Okay. Then do I have a motion to adjourn?
So thanks to the chair
Madam
also.
Chair.
Thanks to the chair.
I'm sorry, wait a minute.
Thank you, Mrs. Miller. Thank you, Mrs.
Miller.
Manecki.
Yes.
Great
Thank you,
job.
Sharon. Great
Yeah.
sharing.
Thank you, Sharon.
And
Appreciate
Okay.
you.
Sharon,
Thank you.
outstanding alphabetic agility this week.
Love it.
Okay. So let's vote in favor of adjourning. Say aye.
Yay!
Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate your
Thank
patience
much.
and everything.
Thank you so much,
Thank
everyone.
you, Mrs. Miller.
Yeah, thanks, Mrs. Miller. Good.